First contact folly. The Kryvax Empire had spent millennia perfecting the art of the hunt. Their massive bioships, crafted from living crystal and pulsing membrane, prowled the darkness between stars searching for worthy prey. High Marshal Zen stood on the command deck of the Apex Ascendant, his iridescent scales shifting through shades of deep purple as he reviewed the latest planetary survey data. Another primitive world, he chittered dismissively, multiple sets of compound eyes scanning the holographic display. Earth rotated slowly before him, a blue-green jewel suspended in the void. Barely achieved spaceflight. No energy shields. No quantum weaponry. Hardly worth our time. First Scout Wren, her scales a more practical olive green, approached with careful deference. The inhabitants show some promise, High Marshal. They've spread across their entire planet, adapting to every environment from frozen tundra to scorching deserts. Our initial scans suggest they're tool users with basic projectile weapons. Zen's mandibles clicked in amusement. Tools. Projectiles. We mastered antimatter centuries ago. These humans are merely clever animals, nothing more. He gestured at the display with one clawed hand. Still, the hunting grounds look promising. Those vast wilderness regions could provide some sport, if nothing else. There's something else, Wren added, her voice carrying a note of curiosity. Their information networks contain countless references to hunting. They appear to actively pursue and kill creatures many times their size and strength. Propaganda, obviously, Second Marshal Keth interjected from his station. No species at their technological level could successfully hunt apex predators. It defies logic. Zen studied the data scrolling past, images of humans pursuing massive horned beasts across plains, tracking striped predators through jungles, even hunting gigantic marine creatures in the depths of their oceans. Perhaps they'll prove more entertaining than expected. Prepare a hunting party. We'll start with their most challenging environment, that northern region they call Siberia. The command deck erupted in excited chittering. The Kryvax hadn't had a proper hunt in decades, not since subjugating the silicon-based hive minds of the Nexus cluster. Their recent conquests had been disappointingly straightforward affairs. One small concern, High Marshal, Wren ventured. The humans seem to have extensive experience as both predator and prey. Their historical records suggest dash. Historical records written by primitives, Zen interrupted. We are the Kryvax. We hunted the star whales of the Carina Nebula to extinction. We tracked the phase-shifting phantoms of Epsilon Eridani across 11 dimensions. What could these humans possibly teach us about hunting? The answer to that question would soon reshape the Kryvax's understanding of what it truly meant to be an apex predator. But for now, High Marshal Zen simply inputted the coordinates for their first hunting ground, the remote Siberian village of Novaya Zemlya, population 47 humans. On Earth, veteran hunter and tracker Nikolai Volkov stood on his cabin's porch, watching the northern lights dance across the star-filled sky. Decades of experience had taught him to read the subtle signs of his environment, the unusual silence of the wolves tonight, the nervous behavior of the local wildlife, the faint shimmer in the aurora that didn't quite match natural patterns. Something was coming. Something that didn't belong in his woods. Nikolai smiled slightly as he checked his well-worn rifle and gathering his tracking gear. Whatever these visitors were, they were about to learn why humans had remained at the top of Earth's food chain for thousands of years. In orbit, the Kryvax hunting party made their final preparations, their crystalline armor gleaming as they loaded weapons designed to take down creatures the size of small moons. They expected an easy hunt, a chance to add another primitive species to their trophy walls. They had no way of knowing they were about to become part of a very different kind of hunting story, one that would be whispered across the galaxy for generations to come. A story about how the most dangerous predators in the universe weren't the ones with the most advanced weapons or the strongest natural defenses, but the ones who had spent their entire existence learning to outsmart, outlast, and overcome everything their world could throw at them. The hunt was about to begin. But not in the way the Krivax expected. The hunt begins. The Siberian winter greeted the Krivax hunting party with brutal indifference. Their crystalline armor, designed to withstand the vacuum of space, struggled against the simple persistence of sub-zero temperatures. High Marshal Zen materialized with his elite team in a clearing, their biotech camouflage systems already working to blend them into the snowy landscape. Primitive conditions, Second Marshal Keth observed, his external sensors struggling to adapt to the extreme cold. The prey species actually lives in this environment voluntarily. Spread out, Zen commanded, ignoring the question. Standard hunting formation. Remember, we want to observe their basic behaviors before we begin the culling. His voice carried both authority and contempt, the typical tone of a Krivax commander about to add another species to their empire's long list of conquests. What the Krivax didn't realize was that they were already being watched. Nikolai Volkov hadn't survived 40 winters in the Siberian wilderness by ignoring his instincts. The moment their ships entered the atmosphere, he'd activated the emergency warning system he'd helped design after the first hints of unusual activity in the sky months ago. In the village's communal hall, a small group had gathered around the ancient wood stove. Dmitry Baranov, a former military scout turned wilderness guide, spread out a detailed topographical map. 3 landing sites detected, he reported, pointing to marked locations. Their technology is advanced, but they're moving like tourists in a shopping mall. Anya Petrova, the region's most respected tracker, nodded in agreement. Her fingers traced natural choke points in the terrain. They're following predictable search patterns. No respect for the landscape. No understanding of how wind and snow can betray movement. They think they're apex predators, Nikolai added, entering the hall and shaking snow from his beard. But they've never hunted in a place where the environment itself is your first enemy. He pulled out his satellite phone, checking messages from other villages and hunting stations across the region. Groups all along the Yenisei River are reporting similar contacts. They're testing us. Back in the forest, the Krivax hunting party was getting their first lesson in human ingenuity, though they didn't realize it yet. Their advanced sensors, capable of detecting life signs through meters of solid rock, were being steadily overwhelmed by hundreds of small heat signatures. More primitive life forms, First Scout Ren reported, frustration evident in her voice. But the patterns make no sense. They appear and disappear randomly. What she didn't know was that she was detecting an array of simple decoys, hot rocks wrapped in fur, small fires in buried containers, and other basic but effective methods of confusing thermal imaging. High Marshal Zen's mandibles clicked in annoyance. Impossible. Our technology is beyond such simple interference. Yet even as he spoke, his hunting party was being subtly herded through the landscape. Every time they detected what seemed to be human activity, it led them along specific paths that any local could have told them were treacherous in winter. Dimitri's voice crackled over encrypted radio channels, coordinating with other villages. Remember the wolf pack pattern. Let them think they're choosing their own path. It was a reference to an ancient hunting technique where humans would use the landscape itself to guide their prey into natural traps. The Krivax's first real challenge came as they approached what appeared to be an abandoned human dwelling. Their scans showed residual heat signatures, suggesting recent occupation. High Marshal Zen signaled his team to surround the structure, their weapons charged and ready. Primitive construction, Keth observed, studying the log cabin. No energy shields, no defensive systems. Barely more advanced than animal dens. He moved closer, his armor's sensors probing for life signs. That's when the ground gave way beneath him. The seemingly solid snow collapsed into a carefully constructed pit, the walls lined with materials that scattered their bio-readings. As Keth fell, his automatic stabilizers kicked in, only to short out as they contacted the freezing water at the bottom of the trap. Impossible. Zen roared, watching one of his best hunters thrash in what appeared to be a simple hole in the ground. These primitives couldn't possibly understand how to interfere with our technology. But they did understand something far more fundamental: physics. The pit trap wasn't designed to defeat their advanced technology. It simply used basic principles of temperature and conductivity to let nature do what it did best. The Krivax's sophisticated equipment, never designed for prolonged exposure to such extreme cold, began failing one system at a time. In the village hall, Anya studied drone footage of the aliens' predicament. They rely too heavily on their tools, she observed. They've forgotten the basics of survival. Of reading the land and weather. She turned to Nikolai, a slight smile on her weathered face. Should we show them how real hunters work? Nikolai checked his old rifle and nodded. Time for lesson 1, in real hunting, the environment is either your best friend or your worst enemy. Your choice. He looked at the gathered hunters, each of them hardened by years of survival in one of Earth's most unforgiving regions. Let's teach our visitors why humans have remained the apex predators of Earth for thousands of years. The hunt was indeed beginning. But not as a contest between advanced aliens and primitive humans. Instead, it was shaping up to be a masterclass in the difference between having superior technology and truly understanding what it means to be a hunter. The Krivax were about to learn that lesson the hard way. Tables turned. High Marshal Zen was learning several uncomfortable lessons about hunting on Earth. First, their advanced camouflage systems, designed to bend light and mask energy signatures, were worse than useless in the driving snow. Second, their crystalline armor, while theoretically impervious to most weapons, had a disturbing tendency to accumulate ice in crucial joints. And third, most worryingly, the humans were no longer acting like prey. Another sensor ghost, First Scout Ren reported, her voice tight with frustration. That makes 17 impossible readings in the last hour. She adjusted her scanning equipment, which was beginning to show signs of stress from the extreme cold. It's as if the entire forest is alive. The forest is alive, Nikolai's voice crackled through their communication systems, causing the entire hunting party to spin in place. You're just not used to listening to it. The humans had cracked their supposedly unbreakable communication encryption hours ago, using nothing more complex than pattern recognition and patience. In the village's makeshift command center, Dmitri monitored the aliens' movements through a network of simple but effective surveillance methods: tripwires connected to old bells, pressure plates made from frozen branches, and the eyes and ears of every hunter and trapper in the region. They're still thinking like space hunters, he observed. Always looking up and out, never down and in. Anya nodded, adjusting her own equipment, a combination of modern technology and traditional tracking methods that had served her family for generations. They don't understand that on Earth, survival isn't about having the best weapons. She checked the weather forecast on her tablet. It's about knowing when not to fight at all. The Krivax's frustration was reaching a breaking point. Their hunting party, now down 3 members to various, primitive, traps, had been trudging through the snow for hours. Every time they thought they had cornered their prey, they found only clever decoys and more traps. Impossible. Keth snarled, after their 5th attempt to surround a human settlement resulted in them finding nothing but an elaborate setup of heat lamps and recorded sounds. These creatures are barely past their stone age. They shouldn't be able to evade us like this. A low chuckle echoed through their compromised communications. Stone age? Dimitri's voice carried genuine amusement. We've been hunting since before we had stone tools. Do you know how we did it? The aliens could hear the smile in his voice. We walked our prey to death. Followed them until they couldn't run anymore. We called it persistence hunting. As if to demonstrate this point, the humans began a new phase of their operation. Instead of hiding, they made themselves just visible enough to draw attention. A flash of movement here, a distant figure there, always just out of reach, always leading the Krivax deeper into the wilderness. They're trying to exhaust us, Ren realized, her tactical training finally kicking in. Every step we take follows their plan, not ours. High Marshal Zen refused to accept this reality. We are the galaxy's ultimate hunters. We will not be outsmarted by primitives who haven't even achieved proper spaceflight. His outburst was interrupted by a series of sharp cracks echoing through the forest. The sound wasn't gunfire, it was ice breaking. The humans had led them onto a frozen lake, carefully weakened over the previous hours through a combination of hot water and strategic pressure points. The Kryvax's heavy armor, designed for the vacuum of space, now worked against them. You know what makes humans dangerous? Nikolai's voice came through again as the aliens struggled to find solid ground. We never stopped learning from everything around us. Every plant, every animal, every change in the weather, it's all information. All part of the hunt. In the village, Anya watched through binoculars as the alien hunters floundered. They're learning, she noted with professional appreciation. But not fast enough. She turned to the gathered locals, each of whom had contributed their own skills and knowledge to the effort. Time for Phase 2. Dmitri grinned, picking up his rifle, not to fire it, but to use its scope as a signaling mirror. Let's show them why humans are called the most adaptable species on Earth. The signal flashed across the valley, triggering a coordinated series of events. Rangers and trappers who had been quietly positioning themselves for hours began activating simple but effective deterrents, smoke from green wood to confuse sensor readings, carefully positioned mirrors to create false reflections, and the strategic use of local wildlife to create misleading trails. You see, Nikolai's voice explained to the increasingly frustrated aliens, hunting isn't just about having the best weapons or the strongest armor. It's about understanding your environment so well that everything in it becomes a tool. A pause, then, even the weather. As if on cue, the wind picked up, driving snow and ice in stinging sheets. But this was no natural storm, the humans had spent generations learning how the region's geography affected weather patterns. By selectively clearing certain areas and blocking others, they could effectively steer cold air masses like shepherds guiding sheep. The Kryvax hunting party found themselves caught in a carefully engineered whiteout, their advanced sensors completely overwhelmed by the combination of natural phenomena and human ingenuity. They had come expecting to find primitive prey. Instead, they were learning why humans had remained Earth's apex predators despite being outmatched in nearly every physical category by their competitors. The hunt continued, but with each passing hour, it became less clear who was truly hunting whom. Predator's pride. The Kryvax hunting party's situation had deteriorated from embarrassing to desperate. Their advanced weapons, useless against an enemy that refused to engage directly, now served only as expensive deadweight in the deepening snow. High Marshal Zen's crystalline armor, the pride of Kryvax technology, had accumulated so much ice that each movement produced a symphony of creaks and groans. Status report, he demanded, trying to maintain some semblance of control over the situation. First Scout Ren, her scales now a muted gray of exhaustion, consulted their failing equipment. 3 hunters lost to environmental hazards, 2 more with compromised armor systems, and... She hesitated, mandibles clicking nervously, we appear to be surrounded. Impossible. Zen snarled, but his protest lacked its earlier conviction. Our sensors would have detected any encirclement. A new voice joined their conversation through their hijacked communications. Your sensors are looking for the wrong things. It was Anya, her tone carrying the patient explanation of a teacher correcting a student's basic mistake. You're searching for energy signatures, heat patterns, movement. But hunting isn't just about finding prey, it's about understanding their behavior. In the command center, Dmitri watched the tactical display as dozens of green dots, representing local hunters, trackers, and rangers, moved into position. Each person knew their role, carried out with the precision that came from generations of hunting experience. Notice how they bunched together when threatened, he observed to Nikolai. Like city dwellers who've never faced real predators. Nikolai nodded, checking the weather readings on his tablet. They still think numbers and technology make them apex predators. They never learned the most important lesson of hunting. He keyed his radio. Time to teach them. Across the valley, carefully positioned hunters began a series of coordinated actions. Not attacks, something far more fundamental to hunting. They began manipulating the aliens' environment in ways that spoke to instincts far older than technology. Strange sounds echoed through the trees, combining natural and artificial sources in ways that triggered deep-seated prey responses. Shadows moved in impossible patterns, created by nothing more complex than cloth and wind. Every sense the Krivax possessed began telling them they were no longer the hunters. "What's happening?" Second Marshal Keth demanded, his weapon tracking shadows that disappeared the moment he focused on them. "These are primitive tricks. We've hunted beings that could bend reality. Yet you never learned to bend nature," Nikolai's voice replied calmly. "You conquered the stars but forgot the ground beneath your feet. Every child in our village knows more about real hunting than your entire species." To demonstrate this point, the humans began their endgame. Years of living in one of Earth's harshest environments had taught them that victory didn't always require direct confrontation. Sometimes, the most effective strategy was to let nature do the work. The Krivax's positioning had not been random. Every false trail, every sensor ghost, every apparent tactical retreat by the humans had served to guide them to this precise location. A natural bowl in the terrain, where wind patterns created perfect conditions for what was about to happen. "You should feel honored," Anya's voice informed them. "We're about to show you a hunting technique passed down through thousands of generations. We call it weather working." The temperature, already well below freezing, began to drop further. The humans had spent hours preparing this area, using their understanding of microclimate manipulation. By selectively clearing and blocking certain areas, they created a cold air sink, a natural phenomenon that, when properly encouraged, could drop temperatures to lethal levels. The Krivax's armor, designed for the vacuum of space, had a critical weakness: it relied on active temperature regulation. As the cold intensified, their systems began failing catastrophically. Warning alerts filled their helmets as their supposedly superior technology succumbed to simple thermodynamics. "Impossible," Zen whispered, but this time there was no anger in his voice, only dawning comprehension. "Your species, you're not just tool users. You're tool makers. Environment shapers." "Now you're beginning to understand," Dmitri replied. "Every human child learns that survival isn't about being the strongest or having the best weapons. It's about adaptation. About turning your environment from an enemy into an ally." The aliens watched in disbelief as humans approached their position, moving through the killing cold with nothing more than well-designed winter gear and generations of accumulated knowledge. Their movements were precise, efficient, the motion of predators who knew exactly how much energy to expend in their environment. "Your greatest mistake," Nikolai explained, now standing visible before the trapped hunting party, "wasn't underestimating our technology. It was underestimating our relationship with our world. Every plant, every animal, every weather pattern, they're all tools in our arsenal, if you know how to work with them rather than against them." The Krivax hunting party, proud representatives of a species that had dominated countless worlds, found themselves experiencing something entirely new, the humbling recognition that they had never been the hunters at all. They had been players in a demonstration, a carefully orchestrated lesson in what true hunting entailed. Nature's champions. 3 months after the Siberian incident, as it came to be known in galactic records, High Marshal Zen stood before the Galactic Council of Hunters. His once pristine ceremonial armor had been modified, now bearing traditional human hunting symbols carved into its crystalline surface, a gesture of respect learned during the unexpected conclusion of their Earth expedition. "Honored Council," he began, his voice carrying none of its former arrogance, "I come before you to propose an unprecedented modification to our species classification system." He gestured, and a holographic image of Earth appeared in the chamber's center. We must reclassify humans not merely as intelligent prey, but as the galaxy's premier hunting species. The chamber erupted in chittering protests. A counselor from the Nexus cluster rose, their silicon-based form glittering. Absurd. These primitives barely have space flight. Their weapons are centuries behind ours. They don't even have neural interfaces. Zen activated a recording, and the chamber fell silent as they watched the events in Siberia unfold. They saw how a small group of humans, armed with little more than knowledge and tradition, had systematically dismantled one of the galaxy's most advanced hunting parties. What you fail to understand, Zen explained, is that humans don't hunt despite their technological limitations, they hunt better because of them. They never grew dependent on advanced systems. They never forgot the fundamental principles of what it means to be a true predator. In the recording, Nikolai's voice explained to the captured Kryvax how humans had learned to read weather patterns by watching birds, how they had developed tracking techniques by studying wolves, how they had turned their understanding of physics and nature into tools more effective than any energy weapon. But surely this was an isolated incident, another counselor protested. A small group of specialists in extreme conditions. First Scout Ren, now bearing the title of xenoanthropologist, stepped forward. We thought the same. Then we investigated further. She displayed data from around Earth, indigenous hunters in the Amazon using knowledge passed down through millennia, African trackers who could read stories in disturbed grass, Arctic communities that had turned ice itself into a hunting tool. Humans don't just hunt, she continued. They teach hunting. They preserve and pass down knowledge, constantly adapting and improving their techniques. Every generation adds to a legacy of hunting wisdom that stretches back to before they had written language. Back on Earth, life in Novaya Zemlya had largely returned to normal. Nikolai sat in the village hall, teaching a group of children the same skills his grandfather had taught him. But now their lessons included new information, the importance of heat signatures, the behavior patterns of overconfident spacefaring species, the weak points in crystalline armor. Remember, he told his students, technology is just another tool. A good hunter's real weapons are patience, observation, and understanding. The galaxy is vast, but the principles of hunting remain the same whether you're tracking a deer or outsmarting an alien invasion force. In orbit, the Kryvax ship Apex Ascendant had been repurposed. Now it served as an observation post, staffed by xenobiologists and cultural researchers eager to learn from humanity. They watched in fascination as humans demonstrated hunting techniques that no advanced civilization had ever considered, turning simple physics and natural patterns into advantages more powerful than any technology. The Galactic Council's final classification of humans became required reading for all spacefaring species. Humanity, classification, apex predators of unprecedented type. Notable characteristics, masters of environmental manipulation, persistent hunters, tool innovators. Warning, do not assess based on technological level. Human hunting capabilities appear to be inversely proportional to their reliance on advanced technology. Recommended approach, peaceful contact only. Under no circumstances should humans be considered prey. Special note, their training programs are now the galaxy's gold standard for hunter education. In the years that followed, Earth became a destination for hunting specialists from across the galaxy, all seeking to learn the old ways that humans had never forgotten. The Kryvax, once proud of their technological superiority, became humble students of human hunting techniques. And in Siberia, where it all began, Anya and Dmitry started an interplanetary hunting guide service. Their first rule for alien clients was simple: leave your advanced technology at home. Here, you'll learn to hunt the human way, with patience, wisdom, and respect for the environment that had shaped humanity into the galaxy's ultimate hunters. The story of how humans proved themselves as apex predators spread across the stars, but perhaps the most telling detail was a small addition to the Kryvax hunting manual's introduction. Before seeking prey, ask yourself, are you hunting like a human would? If not, you're probably doing it wrong.